The decision of when to retire a horse to stud is a difficult one, and there's a lot of variables. I'm Ned Toffey. I'm the general manager at Spendthrift Farm. The stud farms put up a lot of money to acquire the breeding rights to these stallions, and they've got to protect their investment. So very often at the end of the 3-year-old year, a horse is very likely to be at his peak value. The public would love to see these horses remain in training. We're fans too. We'd love to see them remain in training. Breeders sometimes have short memories, and that value can plummet very quickly if a horse goes off form too long before going to stud. Breeding season starts in America in mid-February. We open our shed February 10th. It usually goes through the end of June, and we'll oftentimes breed into July. Fortunately, stallions, the new career that they enter here at stud comes fairly natural to them. The stallion's going to be turned outside. He's going to be able to run around in a paddock, which is something he hasn't done for a long time. They lose some of their fitness. They go through a pretty dramatic physical transformation. But once we get closer to breeding season, there's a whole series of vaccinations, herd health types of things that we go through. And the most important thing is to test breed. We actually bring in a mare that's in heat that we know will be very receptive to what may be sort of a clumsy stallion making his first efforts at breeding. Into Mischief is probably the best breeding horse I've ever seen. The first time we put a test mare in front of him, he paused behind her momentarily, mounted her and bred her, and never looked back. Most stallions aren't that easy. They may mount the mare from the side. They may take several mounts before they figure out exactly what they're doing. Every stallion's an individual, and it's a process with each one. We obviously want to try to get the best book of mares that we can. It's also important to get the stallion a good full book. We start out thinking about 185 mares on a first-year stallion. Most stallions, if they breed well, are able to handle a book like that. In the case of a horse like Authentic, it's a fairly easy job because he's a very popular horse, and we had an overwhelming number of mares that were submitted to him for breeding. Rather than us trying to be too specific in terms of our criteria that we're going to accept for a given stallion, we like to use the expertise of all the different breeders out there. How does the mare complement the stallion? Some people may want to try to put a little more speed into a horse that's already got a lot of speed, but he's also a classic type of horse. Other people like to take a like-to-like approach. The idea that what worked for Authentic should work again if you try to replicate that. So there's a lot of different approaches out there, a lot of different ways to go about that. And we really like to utilize the expertise because there's so many good breeders here in Lexington and really around the country. One sure sign that breeding season is approaching for us every year is the date December 1. That's the time when we put maiden mares and barren mares, in other words, mares that are not pregnant, under lights. We have an artificial lighting program, as most farms do, that helps bring mares into season earlier. Because all thoroughbreds' birthdays are January 1. We like to have foals that are born as close to but after January 1 as we can, thus the mid-February start to breeding season on an 11-month gestation. Typically, it takes about 60 days of artificial lighting for mares to come into heat. We will tease the mares regularly. A teaser has one of the less glamorous jobs in our industry. He's a male horse that we present to each mare and gauge her reaction. And when she's receptive to his advances, then we'll bring the vet in to pinpoint the exact optimal time to breed the mare. The main tool that the veterinarian is going to use to do this is ultrasound, and we're scanning down through the rectum wall over the ovaries and over the uterus. We can monitor the size and development of follicles. Generally, right before mares ovulate, that follicle gets to be 45 or 50 millimeters in diameter. And you would like to breed a mare within about 48 hours prior to ovulation. Most stallions, the vast majority of stallions, are fertile enough that if she ovulates 48 hours after breeding, you have a very good shot at getting a conception. In a given breeding session at Spendthrift, we have to stand 24 stallions. So there may be 18 or 19 mares coming into our breeding shed on any given session. When the mare gets here, the first thing that we do is put her in a teasing stall that's specially designed with a sliding door to let the teaser get at her, and we're gauging her reaction, we're gauging his reaction to determine whether or not she is receptive. When a mare is not receptive to a stallion, she generally will be quite aggressive towards his advances. What we're looking for when we're teasing is oftentimes very, very subtle changes in her behavior. Playing of her ears, just subtle things in her posture that are enough to tell you that yes, this mare is coming into heat. Some mares come into heat and it's quite obvious. They will, what we call break down. They will park themselves out in sort of a receptive stance, and they will empty out, in other words, urinate, which is something that they do in anticipation of breeding. That's what we call red hot and is ready to be bred. Once she's determined to be receptive, we're going to hang a clip on her halter with the name of the stallion, and we're going to take her and she's into a wash rack. She's going to go into a stocks that protects the person working on the mare. Her tail will be wrapped. The vulva and surrounding area will be washed up and prepped for breeding. Once all of that's complete, the mare will go into the breeding shed. You'll see in our breeding shed that, first of all, it's a fairly spacious area and there's lots of padding. The walls are padded, the floor is padded. We have a shredded rubber surface on our floor. These are going to help protect the horses. The other thing that we're going to do is we've got a set of heavy felt boots that are going to be placed on the mare's hind feet. If she were to happen to kick at that stallion, this will just soften the blow and even help deflect it a little bit. Stallions are almost always ready to breed. There's no teasing involved there. Oftentimes they're breeding multiple mares over multiple breeding sessions during the course of a day. Authentic, Into Mischief, Golden Sense, that sire line has tremendous libido and tremendous fertility. Watching his behavior, you're going to see where the word stud comes from. This horse is going to come in oftentimes with his neck bowed. He's going to be prancing, whinnying, snorting. He's ready to go. We usually have 4 to 5 people in the shed with the horses to try to make sure that everything goes safely. He's a very good breeder. This is a horse who's so light on his feet and so athletic. It's not surprising that he was a wonderful racehorse when you watch him move around in the breeding shed. Once he's bred the mare and he's on his way back out, you're going to see a very different demeanor. He's ready for a cigarette. He's going to come out very relaxed and head back to his stall pretty content. Thoroughbreds are unique in that they are the only breed that the registry requires that the stallion physically breed the mare. There's no artificial insemination done in the breeding of thoroughbreds. We are allowed to reinforce the breeding. We will collect a little bit of the remaining ejaculate as the stallion backs off the mare. We will then look at that under a microscope in a lab here in the shed, determine that he did actually physically breed the mare. Do we see the presence of live sperm under the microscope? We will take the rest of that dismount sample, we'll strain it, we'll combine it with a semen extender, go in vaginally through the cervix, and put the rest of that dismount sample into the mare's uterus. Typically, we'll probably do about 75% of the mares. We will reinforce the breeding. And this is just a little bit of added insurance that we got the semen exactly where it needs to go. Usually the day after a mare's bred, the veterinarian again will come back and ultrasound the mare to determine whether or not she's ovulated.
All right, she's good to go.
Assuming the mare's ovulated on time, that will be it until it's time to check her for pregnancy. Once a mare's confirmed in foal at 42 days, you're just counting days, a little over 11 months, and hope to have a foal on the ground. We're looking to breed these mares back within about a month post-foaling. Usually within that time period, a mare's uterus is fully involuted and she's well able to be bred and maintain a pregnancy again at that point. When somebody buys a breeding for their mare to a stallion, we refer to that as a season. And essentially what that means is you're buying the right to breed your mare to that stallion during that breeding season. So you've got all breeding season to get your mare pregnant. If she's not pregnant on the first try or two, you can come back again and again right on through the end of the breeding season. Once that mare is in foal and she's produced a live foal, that's the point at which the stud fee most commonly becomes due. It's what we call a stands and nurse season. We sometimes do seasons on what we call a payout of proceeds basis. When the breeder breeds their mare, their intention is to take that offspring to auction. And so we may allow that breeder to pay from the proceeds of the sale of that horse, which may take place as a weanling, even take place in utero, may take place when the foal is a yearling, and we'll get our income based on the sale of the horse. The first year stud fee is really based on what that horse has done, what his pedigree is, and what he looks like. The physical is a big influencer in terms of whether somebody wants to spend that money for a stud fee or not. Raising or lowering the stud fee on a given stallion from year to year, it's really very similar to watching the stock market. You're looking for performance. If a stallion starts to produce runners, that's really the most significant factor, is if they get runners. If their offspring look right, if people really start talking about those foals, you may not be able to raise the stud fee, but you're going to get more people breeding to that stallion. Raising his stud fee, you're going to need to see performance on the track. He's going to have to get first winners and then second stakes winners and hopefully graded stakes winners. When a stud farm approaches somebody who is racing a desirable stallion prospect, you're going to be asked to make an offer. And the way these offers are most commonly structured is that there is a base price that you're willing to pay if that stallion were to retire from racing right now. But a big part of these deals is what we refer to as kickers, essentially incentive clauses. If that stallion goes on to win a Grade 1, if he goes on to win the Kentucky Derby, if he goes on to win the Triple Crown, if he wins the Breeders' Cup Classic, if he's voted champion at the end of the year. These are all things that may have a kicker attached, and how all of the given farms choose to value each of those plateaus and how they present those in an offer to the owner of a horse is going to determine whether or not you are the winning bidder for that stallion prospect. The thinking is that the farm is going to be able to charge more for the stud fee depending on that horse's accomplishments. So the base price protects you if the horse doesn't go on and achieve it the way that you hope. The kickers are a way of compensating the owner of the horse if the horse does achieve that. And again, that's going to reflect in his stud fee when he goes to stud.